just a minute for it to go live. And all right, we are live.
Hi,
Hey, Rebecca, you want to give us your name?
my name is Rebecca Ann Folley.
All right.
Uh, my my maiden name is grossnickel.
Yes, ma'am. So, where do you know me from?
I know you from Boulder, Colorado.
How did we meet?
Um, well, I think we met through people hanging out there. We met. I met your brother. I
Yup.
met a lot of people in Boulder, and I think I met you through them.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember exactly like the first day we met, but we've known each other for a long time.
Yes, ma'am. You used to feed the homeless. That's really the thing that made me remember you. Um, I mean, it was vegan food, and I eat meat, but I'm not complaining. I was glad to have it.
I I did vegan foods and meat soups, but every time I would just do a meat soup, somebody would say they were vegan, and then I would feel bad. So
Yes, ma'am. Well, I've been following your situation. Obviously, it all happened after the situation with Natalie, so my abilities to help people since then have been greatly diminished. But
right,
yep, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I've been noticing that you have reached out for help a lot, and that you asked for help nicely. And that over time, with people just blowing you off and the abuse continued, that you did blow up and you got angry and you vented in a pretty
yeah,
inappropriate way, but you've
I kind
apologized.
of lost my shit.
You did.
Yeah, well, the way I tried really hard to follow the steps. People told me to make reports. People told me to ask for help. People told me to go to domestic violence advocacies. Um, and nothing I did, nobody would help me. And that was while I was feeding, after I was feeding, that was after Jay Campy was following me around to my meals in Boulder and working on that documentary, Love and Knuckles. Um, Nobody would give me a hand. And I didn't understand how these people could say they support what I was doing, all the work I was doing, and nobody would help me achieve my goals on stability, a healthy environment, breaking ties with my family. And so, in trauma and anger and hurt, I would lash out when I felt like my cries were being ignored.
Yes, ma'am. Now, um, there's a few questions about human trafficking, and I don't want to get too into that right now because that's a lot more people involved and a lot more names, and it'll get real confusing real quick. But
Right?
when it comes to human trafficking, I've been saying that the homeless, especially homeless women, are the best resources for finding missing people. How true do you feel that is?
It's very true. But people think like human trafficking is overseas and people are getting cut open and stuff with kilos. No, I mean, that's one form of it. But there is a very domestic form of it too.
A lot of them, yeah. When Human trafficking comes in many forms, and that's something that a lot of people they get one idea in their head and they're stuck with it. Kind of like when you talk about predators, there are a lot of
Right,
financial predators. There are a lot of people that are predatory, against people who are disabled or who are of a different color. When I call people predators, a lot of them, their argument is, oh, well, I never sexually molested you and stuff like that. But the reality is that that's not the only kind of abuse that there is, and that's not the only kind of predator that there is.
right.
Now,
Well, like, huh? Go ahead.
with you being homeless, through the abuse that you've endured and gone through, how difficult is it to be heard, especially by police?
Very, very difficult. And it's even more difficult when members of my family use my book um, for their personal profitable gain. Um, it makes it very difficult because by taking my story and using it and prophetizing off of it, people and then slandering me, people don't take my word with anything.
Now, there's the only reason that I believe your word is because after looking at what you've been showing me, first of all, the statements that you made about feeding the homeless, that right there is what really hit me. Like I was one of those people. Um,
Right,
so I mean, it's not difficult to speak up. A lot of people I'm angry at because all they had to do is admit something as simple as that, but they didn't want to. They wanted to look the other way and they wanted to make excuses. And after 6 years, I mean, it does hurt. And for them to say they love me, they showed me that they don't. They've had 6 years to show me, and they've shown me the
right.
opposite. And you've been through absolutely the same thing.
Yes.
Now, as far as your abuse goes, if you're not comfortable talking about it, you can say you don't feel comfortable talking about it. But being as you posted up so much publicly, all the questions I'm going to be asking you are about things you posted publicly. Um, the sexual abuse, when did that start?
The first memory was in Battleground.
Could you explain battlegrounds? Because a lot of people they'll hear that name and just think crazy stuff.
Battleground, my mom had an apartment in this complex at the end of town by Anderson's Dairy, I think. And a man came into her apartment with a gun. And I was raped. My mom was raped. And when he left, the man was arrested because he was firing a gun in public in town, and it was 4th of July.
Now that was when you were younger, correct?
Yeah, I was very young. I believe if people were to look up my mom's rental history and the time that she was in the same complex as my biological father, Jim Cage, I couldn't have been more than 3 at the time.
Now, as far as domestic abuse, and also you've had experience as a homeless person being abused as well.
Yeah.
Um, is it more prevalent to be abused like that in your own home, or have you had to endure a lot of that on the streets?
It started off with home, and that's why I went to the streets.
And did you get abused the
Um,
same way on the streets?
Not as bad. Not as bad when I was a kid. When I was a kid and I was on the streets, I was almost safer on the streets as a kid than I was at home.
Yes, ma'am. There's a lot of people in my stories who are exactly like that. A lot of them kids I tried to run off and send home, really the reason that they were down there is because they weren't safe at home.
Right.
Now,
Short,
I know you've,
shortly after,
go ahead.
sorry, shortly after my mom separated from Tom Shipley, and we left Brookings, Oregon. We moved back to Vancouver, Washington, down on Simpson Avenue, and I think that was in '89. And it was a few months after that I started sleeping under the Delta Park Bridge.
Now, when I first met you, and you've made mention a couple times about being kind of self-conscious about the way that you speak now, and I noticed that a lot of the times when you are speaking out, you're doing so in typing and texting. Um, a lot of people that you and I both know, when you do it that way, it's difficult for them to understand that you have changed, that you have brain damage from having your head stomped in, and they can't hear that in your typing.
No, they can't. And a lot of people won't listen to me about it anyway. I sent a video clip of me speaking to somebody I knew about 10 years ago. And they said, "Oh, you sound horrible." And I was like, "Well, yeah, because I have brain trauma."
Yes, ma'am.
And they just ignored it and assumed it was other things.
And that's pretty prevalent. I've personally noticed. But another thing is out on the streets, trying to find somebody that you can trust, somebody who's not gonna get desperate and do something foolish or cruel. That's
Right?
how much of that have you had to deal with? People giving false
A lot,
promises.
a lot. I stayed to myself because I've had a lot of people try to lie about me. Um,
Now, these are your
People,
predators who are lying to your friends, correct?
yes. Like people say that they have to take care of me. People say uh, that my speech is because of drugs. Even though my speech has been like this since I took the skateboard and the boot stomp into my head. Um,
Now, can I cut you off there just for a second?
yeah,
One of those instances, and I'm sorry if I get this incorrect because like you have evidence of everything that you're saying. I've seen it. There's just an incredible amount of it. Now the beating with the skateboard was in one state, and the getting your head stomped in was in another. Correct?
yes. The police in Hilo actually was called to that one um, by the bank across the street. They had to pull 3 people off of me because they were bashing in my head. Um, they told me I couldn't press charges. At the same time that they were getting the people off of me and helping me out, they were also giving me a trespassing notification to stay away from Stay Humble and Pray store. Um, so it kind of validates the skateboard bashing to my head. And when I took the boot stomping to my head, that was in Portland, and I went to OSHU. And on the paperwork it said intracranial bleed.
So they stomped you good.
3 people boot stomped me.
Now, for you still
Both,
being in Portland, still being around those people, how scary is that for you having to live in that tent in that area?
um, I'm always nervous. I'm always on guard. If I'm not nervous about the people I'm outside with, I'm nervous about my family. Um, when I got this skateboard to my head, nobody helped me out. When I got the boot stomping to my head, nobody helped me out. So, but a lot of people judge how I handle myself. Um, After the boot stomping in Portland, I realized that my trauma had surpassed the point where I knew what to do with it. So I reached out to a dual diagnosis clinic and said that I had a dual diagnosis and I was in a domestic violence issue, and because of my past, I would be considered a high profile client, and I was coming to them for relapse prevention, as so I did not relapse. But I needed help to take care of my legal paperwork with the assaults in my family, and work on giving myself the right tools so I don't relapse, as so I can resolve this situation and leave the Northwest again. Um,
Now, this,
about
I'm
two
sorry
months
again for
later, I
interrupting
had to
you.
exit the program.
Yes, ma'am. And how many times have you had to move over this?
A lot.
Now, as far as the rainbow family and drainbows, as we call many of them, it depends on who they are. Obviously you don't have a hatred for all rainbows, but
Right? No, I don't.
with the history with your family and also the rainbow family, how easy it is for them, or how easy is it for them to reach out to people and basically get a hold of you anywhere?
Well, when I was in Hawaii, uh, it worked it was very easy for them. Um, there was a man named Mike, and he knew I was Jim's daughter, and he was on Big Island, and he was hurting me. And when I got into Portland, I called up my father, Jim Cooch, and I said, Dad, when I was on the island, were you talking to a man named Mike? While Mike was hurting me, and he knew I was your daughter. And Jim said yes. And at that point, um, fear took over my brain. I was blanketed with this thought that I can't go any place and ever feel like I'll be safe.
Now, you recently apologized, I noticed, and have done so a few times actually. Um, Obviously, you were talking just now about the point where you got extremely desperate, and obviously, you did some pretty horrible, well, said some pretty horrible things, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what is it that you, what is it that brought you around and made you decide to stop doing that?
After I was already feeling just worn down by the situation. Uh, when I walked out of the courthouse and the judge denied my restraining orders, um, I went and relapsed, and I got me some clear, and I was gonna make some bad choices uh, because I felt like I had no value. This was not going to stop and there was no place I could go that I would be safe from my family in this situation. And so I did 3 shots out of what I got. I was going through some stuff online, and I started watching their videos. And in one of the videos, it talks about my community service work, me feeding food, not bombs. And then in the comment, it talked about it doesn't matter if she was or wasn't on drugs, she's still a person. And that with my family, when I was in their custody, nobody gave a damn about me ever. And he started screaming civil suit. And underneath, there was another person making a comment about how if it was somebody else and they fall, everybody would rush to help them. And when I saw that, I realized people were legitimately upset by this situation and me and how I was being treated. And it made me feel like people actually gave a fuck about me. And so when I saw that, I got all teary-eyed, and I walked over to the closet and I grabbed it and I dumped it and I flushed it. And I flushed my 2 points. And I said, and I contacted you and I said, I almost made a bad choice, but I'm stepping back from it. And then I started reading all of the people's comments, and I started realizing how I approached or how I allowed my trauma and my heartbreak and my anger to override my brain. And it just spilled out. 2 wrongs don't make a right. So even if they ignored me begging for help, that doesn't mean that I had the right to say those things. However, the level of trauma does give me some kind of ground where it doesn't look so just out of nowhere.
Right. And with your history, it's obviously not out of nowhere. With the fact that you did try to ask for help nicely before going off the deep end, that does factor into it. You tried everything the right way. You tried everything the way that you were told to, and it got you absolutely nowhere. Now, I want to ask you this, because it is actually pretty important. How many of those instances when you had to go in and talk to the police and had to turn in the police and had to turn in your predators and had to try to get a court date, how many of those times did you have to go in alone?
Every single time. I called 3 different domestic violence organizations in Portland over the last year that I was there, and each one said they would not be able to go into the courthouse and help me file restraining orders. When I was at the Oregon Change Clinic and working with them, they said they couldn't help me fill out or take the restraining orders in. And so I have had to do all of my research, all of my papers by myself on top of everything. And I miss things.
Well, that's part of the trauma that you've endured, and that's something that I don't understand why they use the why they use your trauma as an excuse to do nothing about those traumatic events. I mean, obviously you were having these issues because of abuse. Obviously you haven't always been like this. This is long term.
Right. But see, the thing is they want to say that I have issues because of my trauma. but they refuse to acknowledge any aspects of the trauma.
So basically, they're trying to pretend you got PTSD from blowing your nose or something.
Right. So I'm like, well, if you guys want to say that I have trauma issues, I have mental
You
health
what?
issues because of trauma,
Oh, you're good.
then you have to acknowledge my trauma.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of this issue is coming from is that, many people, rather than understand where you're coming from, they blow you off. And then, when you're literally having to scream for help because it's still going on, you're obviously treated like a lunatic. I mean, I can see the stuff that you're posting up is true, but then I see that nobody's looking at it. They're just treating you like you're a nut.
Right. Which is why I'm always trying to validate everything, because even if they ignore, at least I can prove I didn't lie.
Exactly. And that's something that, like, all right, in just the last few days, there's a lot of things that have gone on for me where I wasn't able to help you. And obviously, that's not your fault. If I was to treat you like crap for trying to get a hold of me the other day instead of trying to explain it to you like a human being, how well do you think that would have been received?
I would have probably ignored you or just reacted because I wouldn't have understood.
Now, I'm gonna obviously I can't stay here for a whole lot of time because after they're closed, there's a limited amount of time on the drive-through, and when the drive-through's done, I gotta go. So I'm charging up my electronics. I do want to be able to set up some appointments to try to tell your story one piece at a time. One thing that I do want to know about, though, a lot of the same friends I do that have been human trafficked. You've been through that yourself. How prevalent is that in the United States among people that you know?
Very. But it comes in different faces.
How many of
Like
the victims?
people think human trafficking is stuffing a body full of kilos and moving them overseas. Um, I was legitimately running up and down the Simpson Avenue, selling my ass and taking drugs from house to house before I was even junior high.
Now, with the other victims of human trafficking, obviously, if you were heard, you could help them. If they hadn't destroyed your voice, then you could help them. Now, with your experience with this, and your experience with trying to get help, and also your experience with trying to help others, how many of these other victims that you know are treated the same way?
A lot. But most of them, honestly, they just say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And they embrace their situation and they just go with it. I refuse to. I refuse to embrace it. Even when I fall, I'm still like fighting against it tooth and nail because it's not a situation that should be.
In your experience, can you get predators to stop being predatory by shutting up? Like,
I don't know how to
does ignoring the abuse
confuse,
stop it?
huh?
I said, does ignoring the abuse put a stop to it?
No. Ignoring the abuse does not put a stop to it. Ignoring the abuse is trying to, perfect example, if I am being raped, how can you, during the action of me being raped, how could you tell me to just function and go on with it, go on with my life, to be okay to heal. You cannot heal trauma if you're still being traumatized.
Exactly. If you're still being abused, you're trying to get help stopping the abuse, and having somebody tell you you just need to move on or you just need to let it go, they're literally supporting the abuser at that point because you're trying to get help stopping it.
Right. And another thing I've run into is like people will want to address the symptoms of my trauma, of my current trauma, but they won't want to do anything about the abusers of the trauma or the legitimate trauma itself. It's like they want to stabilize as to traumatize it.
Now, how many of your abusers have gone on to abuse others?
A lot. But not in the same way as me.
If you had been heard, would those people have had access to harm others?
No, no, they wouldn't. I tried to file a restraining order and stalking report on John Becker and my aunt Donnie in 2016 in Boulder, Colorado.
Red Donnie, right?
Doris Danelle Strawn Majors, my aunt.
All right. I don't know her, but I do know John Becker. So, I mean, I can at
Yeah.
least validate that he does exist.
And I tried to file a stalking report and paper and restraining orders on them when I was in Colorado. But the police told me in Boulder I needed pictures, and that until I had pictures, it would be an open case file with absolutely zero in it, anything in it. It would have my name, it would have a number, but nothing else until I got pictures. So I set out for pictures.
Now, if they, I don't know how to state that properly, and besides that, it's going to be on another video because in the other videos really want to get into how people have treated you for trying to get help. But for right now, we're at about 32 minutes, and I um, will probably have to set up another video interview with you. But
Okay.
with I've been noticing that there are three main names that you've been posting up. A lot of people, when they've been traumatized, they'll say men this and men that or whatever. But you, in specific, instead of blaming all men, you're stating the names of your actual predators. You're going after the
Yes,
actual people who did it. Could you give us
yes.
the three big names that you've been posting at me the most? Do you think you could tell us who those abusers are?
Um, Harry Carroll, Austin, Texas. Doris Danelle Strawn Majors, and Jim Cooch.
Yes, ma'am. Now, when we start getting into your story and start telling about the actual abuse, which that's not easy to do. I can tell you honestly, when I started speaking out about my abuse, especially as a male, telling about what other men had done to me, it doesn't feel good having to do that. It also doesn't feel good, being treated like you're some sort of a monster who's slandering their name for telling on them hurting you. Um, what I want to do with each one of those, because it is an extremely complicated situation with hundreds of names, I want to break down individually all three of those predators, what acts they committed, as well as what acts they were able to convince others to commit by lying about you. Also, with the card that I got. Vic had
Yes.
sent me some money. I talked to Vic this morning, by the way. We did speak about you a little bit.
Did you tell him I've been sending out apologies and trying to explain my actions?
I believe I did actually. One of the things is like Vic, he's standing off a little bit because of the safety of, he had a kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously you knew him after he cleaned up his life and got off the streets. But he's still working with those people, and he gave me a report this morning. I mean, Boulder's doing real bad. They're doing Portland bad right now. I mean, we've got people that are staying in their tents for weeks at a time because they're afraid of coming out, afraid of being victimized. They're, crapping and peeing in bottles and setting them outside of their door because they're afraid to come out. A lot of people, the cops are just, they're
See,
avoiding the actual issues.
see, that's a bad state. That's a bad state. I got into that a few times after the mobbing I got in Portland. Uh, when the guys on the motorcycles at Fifth and Washington would tell me that they were going to rape me with bats and shoot me in my face. I got scared for a while, and I got really bad because that played on to my past sexual trauma.
I do want to stop there. And it's important for me not to interrupt you when you're telling these stories. But I know that you do have a lot of interaction with a lot of different bikers over the years. You grew up with them. My personal opinion is that most bikers are all right. And that's from my personal experience and how I've been treated. But I've met bikers like the ones that you're talking about. In your
I have
opinion,
never met bikers like this before.
right. So, in your opinion, are most bikers those horrible people that did those things, or is it those
No,
individuals?
I wish those individuals. I had never ever had any issues with any real biker clubs before, but the guys that park their bikes outside of Fifth and Washington, that bar downtown in Portland, they weren't like any other bikers I had ever come across before.
Now, with the bikers and being as you did grow up with an understanding of them, how easy it is how easy is it for them if somebody was to send them to try to find you? How easy would it be for them to come find you anywhere in the United States?
And it would be as easy as putting socks on your feet.
A lot of people don't understand the resources that a lot of these guys have, but the fact is they have human resources, and that's where a lot of our issue comes in. Is that it's just us fighting this, but we're fighting people who have help in abundance, and they've also got the money to pay for more help if they need it. So
Right.
with the issues as far as your financial situation goes, obviously the only way to get something done is to work together with somebody else. Now, in your experience trying to work with other people, what are the chances that you can actually trust somebody who says that they're going to help you?
They don't. They have to show through actions and consistency and honesty first. Because the first moment I feel um that they're holding back, they're lying, or they're trying to portray me as something that I'm not. Um, I am very cautious and defensive. Um, a lot of people want to say that they want to help me, but nobody stepped up when I was having my head kicked in or bashed in,
Nobody spoke up.
and so I I have a hard time believing anybody has my best interest at heart. So I have to see through consistent actions and honesty.
Now, obviously, it didn't start off that way. I looked at all the way back, going back a couple of years. You started off speaking to people and asking them nicely and explaining the situation.
Yes.
Oh,
And anybody who knew me in Colorado knew. Even after Becker, I was very open. Like I would feed people, I would help people, and I fought a lot. But it wasn't just random violence. It was people shooting up dope or in a park next to kids or got their needles out next to the kids. And I'd walk by and I'd give them a licking, tell them to pick up their shit, and I'd keep on going. I always gave even my enemies as much as I could. But I got hurt really bad in Hawaii. And I just became traumatized on top of trauma.
Yes, ma'am. I'm about to shut this down here because they just shut down the Starbucks and they're all finished here, so it's about time for me to go. There is a mutual friend of ours that we both love very much. Her name is Desiree Leonard. Sorry about that. That's some very big machines that are very loud with no mufflers that just went by. Um, what would be your advice to any man who wants to mess with Desiree?
Mess with Desiree is like to mess with the Tasmanian devil.
Yes, ma'am. Now, obviously,
That's one woman I wouldn't want to go toe to toe with, but she has some fire in her. But it's also may not do a lot of good with it, but it's one of the things that draws my attention about.
yes, ma'am. She kind of prides herself on being able to beat up grown ass men, don't she?
Yes, she does, and you know what? I find it strong in her. It's not a lot of females that I hear can hold their own on their own, and to see even one or two others, it's nice. Makes you smile.
Lana Christensen. That's another one I wouldn't want to tango with.
Dude, I'm telling you, these women, I may not like them all the time, and I may not agree with the things that they do or even the things that they say. But the one thing that I've always deeply loved about them is those two women, they fight, and they fight on their own. And they're strong women, and they kick ass. And to me, I look up to them. Even when I would go up to them in Colorado, I still looked up to them because of how strong they are.
Now, I've literally had my life saved by Desiree. I've also um, had Desiree. She knocked out several grown men who were trying to assault me. So, I mean, I've got my experiences with Desiree too. I was
I thought
wondering.
Desiree was gonna beat me up one time. I was scared shitless. But at the same time, I turned around and fed her a bowl of soup one day underneath the bridge a few days afterwards. Uh, but I like the fact that her and Lana are such strong women, and they are known for kicking ass.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm gonna end this video. I tried to touch individually on different pieces that you had. You had a lot to say about, and I wanted to make sure that we just touched on them so that we didn't get into all of the complicated mess. Because if people do follow this, and they might, it's important not to overwhelm them from the start. And we basically broke it down into a synopsis today. So we've got individual pieces we can go back to and make individual portions of your story based on those individual portions of the timeline.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna try to get that card set up that Vic said to have it to get it and set it up and try to set up a fundraiser So I'm going to try to do that from my vehicle since all I'm going to have access to is my phone and I won't be able to record on my computer.
Okay.
But once I've got that set up, if I can't get a fundraiser set up, I'll try to pay somebody to help me. Once we've got it set up, though, I'll send you all the information so you can share the crap out of it. If you can beg other people to share the crap out of it, and I'll do the same.
I can't. Nobody will. Like when I was in Colorado, I could raise funds for my community meals. I had quite a few GoFundMe's that Alessandra Downey set up for me uh, for my community meals, Family Helping Family. But after Colorado, if I try to raise one penny just to help myself, even to get myself into a hotel room, to get myself some time away and some healing, I haven't been able to raise a single fucking penny.
Is it easier
So
to get help for you, or is it easier to get help when you're trying to get help for someone else?
for me, it's easier when I was trying to feed other people. I mean, every penny I raised, that when Alessandra Downey would set up the GoFundMe's for my community meals in Boulder, I would spend every penny on the meals because that's what I was telling people I was raising money for. But after I left Boulder, every time I tried to raise money for myself, to get myself off the street, to help myself reach my goals, I couldn't even raise $60.
All right, one moment, because there's a big ass truck. All right, go ahead and finish the last
Okay.
part of that.
All right. What?
I said there was a big truck going by. Could you finish the last part of that?
I said that after Boulder, when I went into White, I couldn't even raise a penny for myself. Like when I finished the book and I got the business license, I put up a GoFundMe so I could build up land and build up sleeping shacks and housing to help people that are homeless and traumatized victims. I sent out
Same thing with Mandy
GoFundMe,
Hughes. There's over a
GoFundMe,
dozen of us with the same dream who are trying that. Over a dozen of us.
and I sent it out to a bunch of people, and I couldn't raise a penny. But those people, uh, they would talk about they wanted to help me, they wanted to support me. It was a good idea. They liked the fact that I was trying to build up Family Helping Family while I was homeless myself. Uh,
Now, since then, when you try to get help for yourself, because obviously it's different getting help for yourself than it is getting help for others. How
right,
many people treated you like you were selfish for trying to get help stopping this obviously ongoing abuse?
a lot of people.
Now, those people that ran away or looked the other way, obviously they're not the ones who perpetrated the actual actions. But how does
No,
it
but
make
I
you
lashed
feel?
out at them because I lashed out at those people because I felt like if they knew if they could help, and I was asking them and they turned a blind eye, that means that they were worse than the people who were actually causing the abuse.
Now, I do agree with you on that, but you took the time to actually apologize for the actions that you've done. Obviously, I have some things to apologize for, but I'm not going to apologize if I wholeheartedly and fully intend on doing it again. So I am not going to do that. However, those
Right.
people that you called up and you lashed out and you said all those mean, horrible things to that you've already admitted to, if you could say anything to them right now, what would it be?
I was angry and I was scared. I was alone. I was hurt. understand how people could hold their families and protect their homes and their children and their dreams. And I was fighting for my sobriety and to build something good out of my trauma and to heal myself all alone, and they ignore me. My reaction was not good, but it was in response. Two wrongs don't make a right, and I gotta clean up my mess. But I can't clean up my mess if I'm the only one trying to clean it up.
Yes, ma'am. We don't live on a planet of one. We all are dependent. Even getting a loaf of bread from the grocery store has over 100 people involved in the process. From growing the food, planting the food, harvesting the food, turning it into flour, and that's just the flour portion.
There was this one particular individual. Um, when I started writing my book in Mountain View, at the Robinsons, I started communicating with this guy online. His name was Rocky Wayne Styles, and he I communicated with him the whole process of writing my book, and he was a positive input. However, uh, when I reached out to him in Ocean View and I said, I fear that my business license is going to be taken away from me. I'll lose my business license. I fear that the guy who's donating the land to family will pull it, and I'll lose my home, and I'll go back on the street, and I'll have to go back into survival mode. And I don't want to. And I am so terrified. And I begged him and begged him. He would tell me that I was important, this thing was special, and then he would ignore. But then I would see him talk about his children and his work and all this, and my heart got so hurt by this. And I wanted him to understand what my feelings were, how it would feel if he was in my shoes. Because I felt him ignoring me would be like somebody ignoring his children. And
So you gave him a small taste of what you're going through.
yeah, and it was solely verbal, but I was trying to make people understand, like, I
It's
wanted
scary.
them to understand.
You wanted them to feel
And
what you were feeling.
right,
It's like when I'm streaming, when I stream on my videos and people tell me how scary it is, I know it's scary. I'm scared. That's what I'm trying to project on them. I am scared. My friends are dead. These things
right,
did happen. One thing, though, is uh, this is almost an hour long, so we've done a
okay,
pretty decent interview here. I'm
okay,
getting more familiar with interviews, and you seem like you're doing a lot better too. I wish people could hear the way that you spoke before the trauma. I really do. But hopefully, some people that we know, I'm going to share this on my Facebook, obviously. Hopefully, some people that we know are going to hear that. They're going to hear how much differently that you speak now, that the trauma is very real, and hopefully, we'll get somebody to listen. However, the Starbucks has been closed a while on the
okay,
lobby part, and
okay.
the uh, drive through when they close, I'm not. They're supposed to not have people here after that. So I'm gonna let you go on this video, and we're gonna make more
Don't
time
get
to
in
do this.
trouble.
I'll try not to get caught. Okay.
Okay.
Good to be with you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught, and remember, you are your brother's keeper.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep. Be safe, Rebecca.
You too.
All right. Now, how do I hang up? You're probably. Oh, here it
Wow.
is. I found it. I found it. All right, that's Rebecca Grossnickel Folley, folks, or Rebecca Ann Folley. Um, like I said, I've known her for a lot of years. When I speak out about the human trafficking, it's not just words, it's not just rumors, it's not a figment of my imagination. These people actually exist. When I first got here, to help Rebecca, and she was missing, obviously I made. Well, you don't get to make a missing persons report about homeless people. The cops don't let you. Mandy Singer already spoke about that. Rebecca's actually spoken about it. Many other people have spoken about it. These victims are very real people. They're not figments of my imagination. They're not. It's not Santa Claus. It's not the Easter Bunny. It's not the Illuminati. It's not some crazy alien conspiracy. It's not some FBI or CIA brainwave ray. It's that people have very, very selfish wants. The people who abused Rebecca didn't do it because aliens convinced them to. They did it because they were messed up on drugs and thought that doing these things to another human being while they were messed up on substances was an okay thing to do. They thought that trying to profit off of her body was an okay thing to do. You guys say you need to get away. You have no idea how scary it is to try. And depending on what group you're trying to get away from, it may not happen. There are certain groups in the United States that if you piss them off, they can find you anywhere. There are also people that it's fine to piss them off, to do whatever you want, because they don't have ties with those criminal organizations, and they also don't have friends in the departments. So it's a tough fight. But the more of us work together, the more of a chance that we have of stopping this. Not just for us. Some of us know that the abuse is never going to end. But we can do something to prevent these things from happening to others, or to at least stave it off a bit. If she had been heard, there are people who would still be alive. If I had been heard, there are people who would still be alive. If we had help turning in our predators, those predators would not be there to harm others. Y'all be safe. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Good to be rid of you. Thanks for coming to visit and all that. You are your brother's keeper.